Hello, everyone.
Hello.
If anyone's watching, there's no one in the comments, which is weird.
Oh, that's
Well,
weird.
You didn't send a link out, did you?
Oh, I should do that real quick.
Oh,
Happy
Happy
St. Patrick's Day, everybody.
Oh, there he goes. There's someone there. Hi, Aidan. Nice to have you joining us.
Yes.
Thank you for that, Artie. Yes, it's a wonderful day in which Irish Americans celebrate something.
With some green water, some green rivers.
Yeah, green beer, green Guinness, and stuff
in
like that.
In honor of famous British man, St. Patrick.
You know the joke about St. Patrick driving the snakes out of Ireland? You know that joke?
No.
Okay, here's my impression of St. Patrick driving the snakes out of Ireland. You ready?
Yeah.
You all right in the back there, lads? That's it. That's an oldie. So how have you been? How have you been this week?
But before we answer that question, I want to point out the beauty of Artie's flowers.
Oh, thanks.
They are very beautiful. Yes.
I feel. I mean, I've done nothing. I do nothing, but I do appreciate the effort that you put in every week to have a different object dart.
Oh well,
yes.
I've got to keep my. Thank you. I got to keep my gay cred up, so
Yeah.
So fair play for women, right?
Yes, absolutely. They did it. They won.
And I would have to say the article that they've got on their website about who's behind the government losing sight of reality is well worth a read. About how all this happened, what departments, what governmental departments, it would seem all of the important ones who are all Stonewall champions were all behind it. It's fair play to them for doing this and for writing this up as well. It's very, very interesting.
And it's I think this is the second time I've said this, but as someone said, women are taxed once by the government and taxed again to stop groups like the ONS doing stupid things. They had to raise the money for the legal challenge, and it's kind of exhausting how women have to constantly be fighting this through crowdfunders and so on.
It is exhausting, isn't it? It's exhausting for cash, for time, sort of mental energy. Because it's so exhausting to say the same things again. Like I saw there was one of the most terrible articles that I've ever read on the Scientific American. I think, is it today or yesterday, by Jack Turban, about policy and ethics. Trans girls belong on girls' sports teams is the title. But the article is just so terrible in so many ways because he doesn't actually argue anything scientific.
Oh no,
really.
It's
the same. It's the same argument. I mean, I can see you're moving and I'm moving, so I'm going to carry on. But it's the same arguments that we see again and again, and we've argued them so often. He goes.
I know, yeah.
He talks about there's no advantage from testosterone, but if there is advantage from testosterone, some women have high testosterone as well. But even if that's not the case, then we need to compensate for other issues that they have in life. But even if that's not the case, there are no trans women Olympic athletes. And actually, they all go, they're trying to kill themselves. So it's not an argument that you can pin down. It's all of these things. And it's in Scientific American. There's no science and there's no real desire to present a coherent argument, a coherent sort of rational argument that you can say, okay, well, look, let's take what you're saying and let's talk about this. It isn't. It's all about how, and right wing comes into it again, and right wing is just always used as some sort of, it's almost used as hate speech now, isn't it? Like when people are just, you're accused constantly of being right wing. It's right wing.
I always say the
disappointing.
That argument is a real tell on their part because they know it's not true, which is why they use it as an insult. They know it's not true. They know that will insult us because most of us are progressives, left wing, and so on. So they use it as an insult because they think it'll hurt our feelings. But my answer to them presenting some right-wing talking head about this stuff is, this fucking ideology is so insane it unites people across the aisle. Everybody knows it's nuts. The only people who don't know it's nuts are the staffers of places like Scientific American, who are now been taken over by a generation that's just come out of college completely full to the gills of postmodern queer theory and postmodernism and white fragility studies or whatever, and they're just kind of taking over the
I do
control.
find it disappointing that there's no real they don't seem to value a reasonable, rational argument, because that is isn't that the sort of cornerstone of science, where you present data or a coherent argument that other people can then argue against? That's how things evolve. But to sort of get rid of that, to pretend that that's not necessary, is really dangerous, I think. And this is how we are getting into this ridiculous anti-science sort of place that we're in, except that it's called science. I saw people say, look, the science, here it is, the science.
That's what they do. They always say.
In fact, this is the subheader. There is no scientific case for excluding them. I suppose, it is extraordinary, but he's not making a scientific case.
Dumb.
No.
Yeah, but he's not. It's so scary that there's such a divide between like the younger people who are just, like you were saying, Graham, completely steeped in this stuff, to the point where it's just going to be so hard to deprogram them. And then older people who are like, this is stupid. I can understand this. This doesn't make sense. But who are keeping quiet because they think, they don't want to get in trouble, essentially. It's so crazy because there's nobody's stopping and taking a step back and saying, why were we ever doing this in the first place? Nobody's actually stopping and saying, what exactly is transgender? What is it? Because any clinician will tell you this is an exceedingly rare psychological phenomenon and a treatment for an exceedingly rare phenomenon. Where people have such severe gender dysphoria that they need a sex change, and they need the best outcome for them would be to live in the opposite sex role. But now it's just turned into, like you're saying, this postmodern horse shit, where it's just like there's no difference between men and women, and we're freeing ourselves from from everything by pretending that the sex of our bodies doesn't matter, when it still matters in every possible way. If we lived in a world where men didn't commit assault at like 100 times higher rates than women, where men weren't more dangerous to women than the other way around, then none of this would really matter. But we haven't solved any of the underlying problems of sexism in society, so we can't just pretend that sex isn't real. But the kids just don't even know how to engage with this. They think it's taboo to even just open their minds to even think about it, because it's like opening your mind to think about, I don't know, something that's so shockingly taboo. Like it's like considering whether there are reasons to separate the sexes to kids these days is like considering whether it's like imagining that eugenics is true and that somehow black people have lower IQs by birth than white people, is the sense that they almost have. The idea that, men and women are socialized differently and maybe even have innate behavioral differences that will require that will require treating them separately in society is this just terrifying idea to kids.
Yeah, I think basically, the internet has just led to a few generations who are suffering from severe brain damage. I mean, it is brain damage.
It's a massive, massive problem. It's much more of a problem than I used to think it was.
Yeah, me too.
And the same with, along the same lines as silencing of people on the internet. Obviously, I'm thinking quite a lot about this at the moment, having been thrown off Twitter and having to think about it in terms of giving evidence to the House of Lords. I realised that this is almost the sort of the cornerstone of everything, isn't it? Because those who control the conversation will just control everything.
Well, may I just interject one thing, Helen, about that? Amazon says they're no longer going to stock books that call that talk about gender dysphoria. They're apparently going to not stock books that talk about the medical basis of transsexualism.
But the steps they took, how they got there, it's crazy. Because first it was like, okay, so transsexualism is rooted in gender dysphoria, which is a mental health condition. But they went LGBTQ, so it's gay rights becomes LGBTQ rights. And because gay is not a mental health condition, you're not allowed to say any of the other alphabet soup letters are. And from there, they say, okay, you can't discuss gender dysphoria. Like they've taken this elaborate series of steps. You know what I mean?
Yes.
To say that for some reason, because gays and lesbians, there's nothing wrong with them, that we can't discuss a valid medical condition called gender dysphoria. Sorry, it's just crazy to me that they've made this, elaborate connection.
Sorry, Helen.
It's absolutely. But I do think it's frightening. I mean, there was that big sort of like hoo-ha about Substack, wasn't there, in the week? I don't know if you saw
that guy who felt that we should be banned from Substack, with the free speech platform.
Well, yes, but Substack have come back and they've offered they offered who was it, was it Jude Ellison, Sadie Doyle, they offered them a I don't know what you do on Substack, you get a sort of professional level one, but they've said no because then turfs, blah 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 blah. But it's all of the same sort of argument, isn't it? Is that because they don't want to hear it, it's hate, and this idea, this sort of prevalent idea that talking about gender dysphoria or sports, segregated sports, comes from a position of hate. It's a very clever and completely now seemingly all sort of pervasive argument. It's almost taken as read now. Well, when somebody says J.K. Rowling, people say, "Oh, anti-trans, hateful bigot," because it's been said so much. I mean, I think Jesse Signal, I can never remember his house.
Jesse Single.
Yeah. But he tweeted an article out. I didn't read it, but I saw that. So the gist of it was how hard it is to refute just one accusation of hate or a lie about you, and once it hits sort of a tipping point of so many lies about you, it's almost impossible. Look at J.K. Rowling. She hasn't been on Twitter for ages and ages. She has been silenced because she is either going to spend all of her time fighting against these lies, or every time she comes on, there's going to be hundreds of people just tweeting, you anti-trans bigot at you. So for her, it's just not worth tweeting anymore. So she has actually been silenced.
I know.
The media, you can't even talk about Harry Potter without the media tying it into her transphobia somehow. If there's some new,
let's make sure we don't.
Some new Harry Potter story, it's like instantly the media says, and what about J.K. Rowling's transphobia? It's so stupid. Yeah.
I don't know. It's getting like last night was even just one night was exhausting in how horrific it was on every front. The things, sorry, let me remind myself, but like the first thing that's just been really depressing me is what happened to that Canadian guy who's now in prison because he won't call his daughter he, that happened. And then the Time magazine cover of Ellen Page, which promotes getting a fucking unnecessary double mastectomy to young girls all over the world, Claire Curran taken out by Twitter, Patton Oswalt saying, please watch this, as if it's good, about a video that featured a video of a guy talking about how his son was wearing dresses and playing with girls' toys, and he didn't like it, and he decided he decided the son was trans, and now everything's fine. Patton Oswalt, a liberal comedian, talking about this conservative Christian putting his son into a closet made of his own body, and Patton Oswalt thinks that's great.
That one really upsets me so much because that's me. That was me. And they chop your cock off. They're going to chop that kid's dick off because his father is a homophobe. It's so upsetting that people watch this and they're like, oh, isn't it wonderful? But it goes back to what we were talking about last week about how if you speak in a certain tone, if you orate nicely, then people will just go with the flow and think that you're authoritative. And here's a man speaking in this tone as though he has a rousing, heartwarming story, and everyone just buys it. And it's like
that's like the Susie Green thing.
It's incredible to me because he says, I'm a son of a Methodist minister. And he's very conservative, and it's the most. I still am astonished by it. I was showing it to my husband because I was so outraged, and I tend not to show, because the poor bugger, he gets it all the time. But I had to show him this one, and he, like, as soon as he watched the very first bit, he said, "But he's just saying to him that you can't wear a dress and you can't play with these toys." So, when the bloke was saying, he was equating wearing girls' clothes with being bad or wearing boys' clothes with being good. No, he wasn't. He was equating playing with toys that he wanted with being a girl, because that's what he'd been told. And it is so regressive. And like that Ellen Page thing, I was reading it. And this is what struck me. The very first paragraph is... but he does remember that acute feeling of triumph when around age 9, he was finally allowed to cut his hair short. I felt like a boy. I wanted to be a boy. I would ask my mom if I could be someday. And then after the haircut, strangers finally started perceiving him as a boy. This could be right out of a Famous Five book with George. I don't know if you read Famous Five, Artie. So Georgina was one of the Famous Five by Enid Blyton. And Georgina wanted to be a boy because this book was written, the first one was written in 1942, which is 80 years ago. And George's answer to being able to row her boat to Kirin Island was to cut her hair short and pretend that she was a boy. And then this was this individualistic solution, which she had to adopt because otherwise, she'd be stuck in the caravan looking at tins of food. That was Anne. But anyway, I read them all. I was happy. But anyway, but this and the first paragraph of this Time article just reminds me exactly of that Famous Five. How she's like, oh, if I cut my hair short now, and I really wanted to be a boy, and then I was allowed to play with boys, and then I wasn't viewed as a girl, which was such a relief. But the relief of not being viewed as a girl is because when you're young, being a girl is the shit gender. It's the shit sex. Because you're not allowed to play with things, you're supposed to help lay the table, etc. Even, when I was growing up, that was sort of the rules. It was, and it's still now, we know in COVID that way more girls have had to help with housework than boys. There was a survey done because it is just all pervasive in society. And this idea that the answer is to, I just have a double mastectomy, cut your hair short and say I'm a boy, and then everyth's all cool. I saw
Paige on a chat show, and she kind of was talking about trans people, and she kind of wailed. It was really disturbing. She was like, "They're being murdered!" on this like light chat show, and that's someone who's got a serious problem, and they've fucking let her go in and get her breasts removed, and I don't know, it just breaks my heart.
And she talks about herself. This is a woman with tens of millions of dollars, an A-list celebrity with fame and fortune. That's no there's no guarantee that she's not going to be in deep distress, as she clearly is. But she's talking, not only has she amputated her breasts, but she's talking as though she's a member of this like extremely oppressed, vulnerable minority now. Our struggle. And it's like, clearly I think she's got all this money and fame and power, but she's got a mental health condition where she needs to see herself as vulnerable somehow. So part of her going into this is she's got some issues that she's got to work out, and she can't blame it on poverty because she's rich. She can't blame it on lack of power because she's super powerful. She can't blame it on lack of friends and fame because she's legendary. So she's got to be trans because there's nothing else you can do. It's like she needs a narrative to understand her own psychological distress. So that's part of the reason she's going into this, it seems.
And that's and that's why there's so many kids are identifying as trans, because they're all in the same position. These are mainly, the stories I hear is that the the kids in schools and who are coming in to see psychotherapists are usually middle class, usually the daughters of successful people, and they're guilty. They see, they are suddenly exposed to all the world's suffering through their laptop and their phones, and they are fucking guilty about it. They feel terrible about it. And one way to assuage the guilt is to become a group that is seen to be oppressed, that is seen to be vulnerable, and so on. Can I move back a little bit? Just to, oh, sorry.
Sorry. I just wanted to say, the poor bugger. I mean, looks quite ill, I think. But there's another part of it where they say that just the thought of having to wear a woman's cut T-shirt made her feel so unwell. And you think that's such a red flag, isn't it? That's got to be something where you think, well, what is the underlying cause of this? Rather than saying, well, I better chop my breast off and become a man, there's obviously there's a mental health issue there.
Yeah.
But there was one more thing that I wanted to say, and this is that Time magazine have uncritically repeated the lie. They've said that 41% of transgender people attempt suicide, according to one study, it says. And it doesn't link to any studies. It doesn't do any sort of link at all. It just uncritically prints this, which I think is just, it's unconscionable, isn't it? It's
That's
so
the
dangerous.
study that was like 10.
It's like, eight self-identified people or something. But there isn't even a link to it. Maybe they looked at it and thought, yeah.
That's the thing. When I was doing my, I did a linkify of my speech. Someone very kindly helped me get my speech to the House of Lords and linkify everything. And I was looking through it, and I got to the bit where I said that J.K. Rowling was defamed by the BBC. I said, she's been defamed by all these people, including the BBC. And I was looking for links. I couldn't find one. And I thought, oh my God, they actually, J.K. Rowling, of course, it's really interesting actually. But, the BBC will get a heterosexual couple on CBeebies and call them lesbians to confuse toddlers, who are like, oh, okay, that's what a lesbian is, just the same as my mom and dad, except my dad with short, long hair. But the thing is, they've actually been they've behaved themselves with J.K. Rowling to some extent, probably a lot of sins by omission, but they haven't actually said she's a bigot or a transphobe. Or they do that thing where they say, oh, one side says this and one side says that. It's very difficult to figure out what the truth is, They do that. But there wasn't actually an example of them doing it. And the reason that is, someone pointed it out to me, of course, it's because they're filming the Cormorant strike books or whatever they're called. Do you know what I mean? They're not going to start saying she's a bigot. And I'd love to just get, I don't know, I just found that very interesting, that when it came to money, that suddenly the BBC finds its conscience and finds its integrity.
Well, there are many people I notice who sort of, they say, they obviously, it's all implications, but they avoid saying things out loud. I looked at Owen Jones's feed about 2 or 3 years ago, to see his use of the word TERF, and I couldn't actually find him using it at all. It was obviously there by implication, answering people using the word TERF, and in a sort of an agreeing way. But the plausible deniability that he'd done was quite good. You couldn't actually say, "Oh, look, here you've used the word," which I think is almost worse, really, isn't it?
Oh, well, apparently that's one reason why the LGB Alliance haven't sued anyone who keeps calling them a hate group, because they, apparently if you don't name someone by name, if you don't actually say Bev and Kate's names, then you can get away with calling them a hate group, But again, there's another example of the BBC. Like the BBC, over the last 2-3 years, however many years the LGB Alliance have been in existence, could have had them on any time to talk to them and find out, are these people a pair of Nazis? And of course they don't, because the very act of interviewing them would show that it's a complete vicious smear against the two lesbians, you know. So it's. But anyway, listen, I do want to go back to something, because I am obsessed with you pointed this out, this thing of people talking confidently, you know. Apparently, Nancy Thingy of Stonewall was in front of the Lords today talking about how many people are non-binary, you know, which I still think is the funniest thing, non-binary, this idea that, you know, there's a thing called non-binary and it exists.
Yes.
It's genuinely funny.
I'm genuinely amazed that got traction. I am.
It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. As if anyone is binary, you know, so dumb.
Yeah.
But it's this confidently talking about crap when they're uncontested that I find just so extraordinary. The best example is the Susie Green video. I know I talk about it a lot, but it's another great example of how all of the stuff, all of the scandal, it's not hidden. It's there. It already exists. The TED Talk by Susie Green is her talking about father was uncomfortable with the gender non-conforming child. The kid played with girls' toys. Father didn't like it. Cut to Thailand. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And I don't mean to laugh at it, you know, because it is a desperately sad situation, and I really do fear for these gay kids. But I do find it funny on one level that these crazy homophobes are being given a platform. And not only that, they get awards. They get awards from LGBT organizations.
No, from LGBT organizations even. But everybody's doing this. It's like our whole, I mean, that Time magazine cover the other day, that's the third time a trans person's been on the cover of Time. And somebody posted all three of the covers together. And I tweeted something about how, like, you know, this just looks like a bunch of gay people trying to trans the gay away and then being lavishly celebrated by straight people, because it's almost this idea that it's like a Cinderella story, that it's unfortunate that you're gay and gender nonconforming, and transforming into a trans person is this wonderful, it's Cinderella, it's this, you're emerging into this, you know, it's a great thing, it's somehow wonderful, there's this underlying subtext to that in these stories, and it really breaks my heart, because it shows that. There's a great example in Canada. There was a story in the CBC a few weeks ago. Are you guys still there?
I'm still here. I think Graham's frozen.
Okay, Graham froze for a minute.
But it's good because we talk over you anyway. So carry on, Archie. You've got the floor.
So there was a story in the CBC about a young butch woman who was playing Ringette, which is a women's only version of hockey, ice hockey. And she was so masculine that she was being mocked by other parents as a guy, and she was facing constant homophobic abuse, essentially. And it's this wonderful, again, it's framed as this feel-good story that now he's a guy and he's found his true self. After, like, and the story is literally like he was being literally attacked every day and mocked and humiliated for being overly masculine, and he's finally found his true self as a trans man. And I'm like, this is the most horrible story. But then, of course, he wants to keep playing Ringette. He can't, because it's a women's only sport. There's no men's Ringette, and he wants to stay on the women's team, but he's a trans man now. And the story is like how tragic this is and how unfair it is, and we have to do something about it. And it's like, first of all, everybody's saying the opposite when it comes to men and women's sports, that when you declare your pronouns the opposite, that means you get treated as the opposite in sports, right? Mm-hmm. And now when a woman wants to stay on the women's team, even though she's called herself a man now, they're up in arms. Like, this is, how dare they treat her pronouns as overriding her sex? This is not fair, you know. But then it turns out she's also taking testosterone, and you can't compete in sports with other girls if you're taking testosterone, you know. So the whole story was deeply hypocritical. But the thing that really upset me, besides all the hypocrisy around sports and performance-enhancing drugs, was the fact that the narrative was this wonderful story of her finding salvation by becoming a trans man, even though it was built right into the story that it all came from constant, nonstop bullying and abuse.
Yeah, homophobic bullying and abuse. It's incredible, isn't it? Just like that bloke that the ACLU tweeted out, you know, the son of the Methodist minister, just like that, so obviously saying, I couldn't handle the shame of my son wanting to play with girls' toys. I couldn't handle the shame of it. But
And Patton Oswalt tweeting, please watch this. Please watch this. It's like,
I saw people saying, "Oh, I'm in tears over this. I'm in tears over it," and I was like, "Well, I'm fucking in tears, but not for the same reason."
Yeah. Believe me, me too. Yeah, they're destroying these children's bodies for life. It's so yeah.
I know. I mean, I'm getting really kind of, I am getting a bit exhausted by it. It's so relentless. Like I'll tell you one of the things that just takes a toll, chips away at you. Like in a lot of my private conversations when we're talking about this, the latest outrage and so on, someone will say, yes, Susan such and such said this. And you always have to ask, is Susan a man or a woman? And they say, it's a man. Okay, great. Thank you. And it's like, holy shit, it's so exhausting just finding out basic facts about this stuff,
Yeah.
You cannot, and I think that a lot of the time, I mean, when Gamergate was happening, I remember I got into trouble because I called some anime account. I said, you're a man pretending to be a woman. But at that time, I wasn't aware of the trans thing. The reason I was saying that was because one of Gamergate's tactics was to pretend to be women and then, say things that were outrageous that would get people fighting against each other. It was just trolls, just, having fun. But now, even on an anime account, real women are just getting kicked off Twitter because of it. I mean, it's extraordinary. All you have to do if you want to get rid of a woman you don't like, is change your pronouns on your bio. If you're a man, just wait for them to say the wrong one. I mean, sorry, I actually don't think that was the point I was going to make, but I lost my thread halfway through.
All right, you try and get that thread back, because I've just remembered something that I really wanted to highlight. It was an excellent thread by it's a psychologist. You've probably seen it. A chap called Jonathan Shedler, where he talks about severe personality problems find camouflage. No one thinks I'm a sadist or I'm a malignant narcissist. They find a belief system or social group that validates their most hateful, destructive impulses and construes them as virtues. And you read this thread, which is absolutely well worth reading. And the most toxic and hateful people in the world are 100% convinced that they fight for what is true and right. And they find allies to cheer them on who also believe that they are on the side of all is true and good. And it goes on, to explain the sort of psychology behind it. And you look at the sort of the trans movement and you think, this is exactly it, isn't it? Because there's only one side calling the other side evil, like completely evil sort of bigots. Well, constantly anyway. There's few people that some of us will now say, God, they're evil, and they started it off. However, there's the pervasive analogy is that our side, we're evil. And it's coming from its hate, and it's evil, and it's bigoted, and it's awful, and it's all motivated by hate. Whereas we're just saying, can we have a conversation about this? Can we try and sort it out? And this thread, it's and the allies thing, and you look at some of the allies, and they are 100% convinced that they are fighting on the side of truth and righteousness, and they're not
like the Scottish actor. The Scottish actor is a great example. The Scottish actor has been trying to shut down lesbian and gay news, and has been contacting advertisers and telling them to pull their. He's on a mission to destroy a gay and lesbian magazine. And this is a gay man. It's absolutely extraordinary, and he's doing it on behalf of straight people who are calling themselves lesbians.
I know, and this is just so I've been trying to it's so amazing, that thread you just read, Helen, about people with their own mental health problems who are finding a way to camouflage them, not just to other people but to themselves. And this is great. So I've been thinking about trying to get back to the idea that there are some very sympathetic people who identify as transsexual on both the AGP side and the homosexual side, female to male and male to female. Small number of people, and that number should remain small because it's a drastic thing to do. But this movement has so many people that, Graham always calls the central outliers. And there's one I was reading about yesterday. Are you both familiar with Steph on Knee?
Oh, yes. Yeah. The person who identifies as a 6-year-old in a sexual relationship with a couple who's their parents.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, but this person,
I didn't know that part.
Yeah.
And he calls himself, he doesn't, it gets worse. He calls himself, so remember, if autogynephilia is the desire to be the thing that you're sexually attracted to, there's a reason he poses as a 6-year-old girl and calls himself Steph on Knee, as in he's a girl sitting on his own knee. He's clearly got a thing for a girl sitting on his knee. It's disgusting. But he's a man in his 50s. He was like a hulking, he was an auto mechanic, big burly alpha dude. Left his family for this whole thing, was abusive towards his family, caused so much disruption with his family. But the trans movement ran headlong into this, embraced this guy as a central figure in the trans movement here. Sorry. What was that? Anyways,
we're having weird connection problems. Just I can hear you, Artie.
So this person was and then this person tells their own story. Steph on Knee tells his story like, my family was so mean to me, not because I'm dressing like a 6-year-old girl and bullying everyone, but because I'm trans,
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
I lost my job because I'm trans. No, you lost your job because you're an auto mechanic who came into work wearing a little schoolgirl outfit and with ribbons in your hair,
Oh my God. Oh my God.
No,
right? But this
they
person
used to be on Twitter.
Oh my God! This person led the trans parade in Toronto at the front of it. So, and then the trans movement, they gave this person jobs in the community center, the LGBT community center in the center of the village, the very same one where Benji had her horrible experiences with the trans movement.
Yes,
because it's just a cesspit of abuse. That building,
Mm-hmm.
It's just insane. But this person has serious mental health problems and frames it all as I'm trans and everybody's evil if they won't indulge my problems. But the trans movement is all in too. I get so sick of people saying, when you try to point out all the problems within the trans movement and people will look at you like, well, these are just a few outliers. It's no big deal. You're highlighting them because you're a bigot and you hate trans people. And it's like, no, these are the people leading the parades. These are the people running the organizations. These are the people at the epicenter.
That brings us neatly on to Amy Challoner. Amy Challoner, who just got a job at Reddit. Reddit, who recently got rid of all their gender-critical subs, including one that contains 65,000 people. Amy Challoner, whose boyfriend is a self-admitted pedophile.
That's right.
Who writes stories about preteens.
Oh, he's gone. He is having connection problems, isn't he?
Glenn, come back.
Okay, I'm going to reset my. I'm going to reset my computer. I'm going to reset my thing, and I'll be back in a sec. But I really want to talk about Challoner. It's
yeah.
So
oh yeah. Okay.
Well, you all right? You carry on. But I'm still stuck really on this Ellen Page story. But a lot of it because of the Time article. Now, honestly, Page is a grown up. I mean, I'm quite sorry that they felt that the whole double mastectomy thing. But it's the framing, I think, of it on cover of Time magazine. The framing of it is so, as you were saying, victim, and just you sort of like Chase. There's a quote from Chase Strangio. You can't enter into certain spaces as a public trans person without being prepared to spend some percentage of your life being threatened or harassed. I mean, honestly, it's like women.
It's never happened.
But women have had to endure this for the whole of their lives. Entering into public spaces, and this idea. Page played competitive soccer and vividly recalls the agony of being told he would have to play on a girls' team. And then it's today, and this is, I think, such an. It's lie adjacent, I think, is how I would say it. Today, several bills list genitalia as a requirement for deciding who plays on which team.
That is not lie adjacent. That's straight up a lie. It's not about genitalia. It's about sex.
Yes, exactly. But and then she says, and Paige says it's horrific, as if it's hard to tell what the horrific there is. Could be saying it's horrific that boys are expected to play on the boys' team, but nobody's going to think that that's horrific, not really, because it's obvious that they should. So it's had to be woven in with this pretense that actually what we're talking about, the horrificness, is that somebody's actually going to go and check your genitals, which simply isn't true. But this article is full of this, and it's right wing, and I feel there are youngsters who are going to read this, so many people are going to read it, and they're just going to believe it uncritically. And I do feel that there's such a lack of responsibility in this reporting. It's almost like that the Jack Turbin article. If somebody writes something about the trans issue, it's just accepted uncritically.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the lies just get perpetuated. Anyway, Graham, you're back.
Thank you. No, here's my thing about Chandler, and I know again this is something I say a lot, but it blows my mind, right? Amy Challoner was at the heart of Stonewall when Stonewall started pushing self-ID, right? Stonewall had been pushing self-ID and kind of, let's call it soft self-ID, which is self-ID without any legal backup, to institutions all over the UK, including the ONS. Right. So the ONS recently had to go to court. We probably had to pay for the fucking tax bill somewhere in that court case, as well as paying the other side to fight it. And it's because of this organization, Stonewall, that has spread these ideas throughout institutions all over the UK. How is it not news that Amy Challoner is married to a paedophile and was central to Stonewall when they were pushing these policies? How is that not news? How is it not news when the ONS had to climb down from this ridiculous position that no one believes in? When we're being told that reality doesn't exist, that biological reality doesn't exist, that men or women, that children can know stuff about themselves they couldn't possibly know at such a young age. The whole thing, for me, if you're talking about central outliers, Amy Challoner is the most central outlier.
Yeah.
I think when the story comes to be told of this whole thing, Amy Challoner will be right at the center of it.
And is still failing upwards. I couldn't believe that after everything that's happened, after the horrific scandal of what happened in the Challoner household, after the constant revelations that at such a shockingly young age, Challoner was engaged in fetishistic behavior online with much older men, and this person is still sexually involved with these people. I just can't believe that when this person was suddenly moderating all these Reddits, that Reddit themselves probably knew about it, but just keeping their heads down and hoping this person would go away. Little did I know, oh no, they've gone all in. They're like, I love the fact that there's an obvious pedophile running our organization. We should put them on the payroll. Like, what the actual, how does this happen?
No, we should say we're talking. Amy is not necessarily a pedophile.
Oh yeah, so Amy is seemingly very clearly a victim of pedophilia and has been surrounded by pedophiles. Amy's father is in prison for a brutal act of pedophilic sexual assault. Amy's husband has publicly stated they used the word pedophile to describe themselves. So I should be very clear about that. But Amy, Amy, I think is a tragic victim. Amy is apparently on the autism spectrum, and Amy was clearly abused by her father. I think we can make that assumption, given the horrific nature of the household and given the mimicry between Amy and her father in terms of the kinds of sexual fetishistic activities they're engaged in, like diaper play and stuff. But yeah, sorry.
Diaper play, fuck me. Yeah, but it's
and this is somehow trans thing, you know.
Yeah.
But I think-
All the
It's
diaper
so
fetishists.
insulting to trans people, to people with dysphoria, to put them in that bracket, you know. But anyway,
Mhm.
I'm
but
just
yeah.
remembering the adult baby takeover, which failed.
Oh, that was very funny. That was very funny. There's a footballer over here, Artie, called Neville. What's his second name? Neville thingy.
I can't remember.
I want to say Neville Shoot, but that's the
I
writer.
want to say Neville Long.
Neville. Someone will help us. Neville. But anyway, Neville Southgate. I think.
Southall.
Okay.
Southall. Okay.
Southall.
But anyway, Neville is in a very sweet way. Was in a very sweet way trying to be very woke, you know. So he wanted to give control of his Twitter account to adult babies who he thought were you know a misunderstood minority group,
yes.
you know. So many people said, "What the fuck are you doing? These are just perverts." That he eventually had to tweet, "The adult baby takeover is off."
It's an evergreen tweet, that one.
Oh my god! Can that be the name of this episode? The adult baby takeover.
Yeah. But if the adult, I'll put it in the comments. But if the adult babies did take over, it would just look like that, wouldn't it? Just posted it. It would just look like that. You know, if they're babies, what are they going to say? Hello, I'm a baby. I'm a baby, and this is our takeover.
Graham's running with it.
A very hairy baby.
Hello, I'm a baby, and this is our takeover. What are they going to do with a Twitter account? You know, but
this is what we were saying, though. It has to be. It's uncritical. It is uncritical. You can seemingly write terrible articles with no links or evidence and get it published in, say, a Scientific American, because it has to be uncritical. If because if it's criticized, then it starts going in it's hate because I'm trans. Although it turns out I think Jack Turban's just a bloke who has found a way of making some cash off the back of this. Well, what does he care about women's sports? He doesn't care at all. I mean, he's a psychologist, right? So it's interesting to him.
There was a guy. No one cares. I mean, that's the thing that I keep kind of slamming up against, and I can only imagine what it's like for you, Helen. But like, I just keep slamming. This guy, a writer, Dorian Linsky or something on Twitter, said that I was the worst example of radicalization by the internet that I've seen, because I'm trying to help women maintain, keep rights they've had for 100 years against people who are saying that sex doesn't exist, and I'm the one who's radicalized,
right?
And it's just because this fucking guy and his stupid friend John Niven, these guys, they literally, it's like they can't hear women's voices. It's like they can't hear it, or they can't see women protesting or worrying about this stuff. It's just kind of invisible to them, and it blows me away that anyone can be like that. It just constantly blows me away that anyone can be like that. I don't see how it's possible, and the thing that I'll never really get used to is the fact that there's so few of us. There's so few of us protesting this stuff, and I just can't believe it.
No, me. We've said it so many times, haven't we? That I never expected to have to be the adult in a room. I didn't want to. I don't want to be an adult in a room. I'd rather just get pissed in the pub.
I wrote "feck drink arse girls." I wrote "feck drink arse girls," and I'm supposed to be the fucking adult in the room,
right?
Do you know what I mean?
I don't even have a driver's license. I'm still basically a perpetual teenager. How am I the adult in the room?
It's crazy. But I do. One thing that's interesting that happened actually. Let's end on a slightly positive note. I've had a lot of responses to people talking about the coming out and gender critical day where people come out of the closet. A lot of people like the idea. So I'm going to think about that seriously and try and get people together to talk about it and see if there's a way of doing it. The idea is, if you're scared because of your job, because of your friendship groups, whatever it happens to be, the idea is that a lot of people come out at the same time and say something along the lines of, we need to have a proper talk about this because this is crazy. You know, we need to think of a date. We need to think of ways to protect people.
Mhm.
We need to make sure that there's kind of legal help if anyone gets into trouble at work. So it's a proper thing we need to start working on. I think, you know, maybe Sex Matters, Maya's organization, can help. You know, all those people. I mean, the amount of money that's being raised every time there's a crowdfunder for this stuff, it just shows a vast majority of people think it's a load of nonsense.
It certainly shows that there are so many people who want to do something, but you know, they are probably right to keep quiet. But as you say, what you want is a critical mass.
Yeah. It's like you have to, because it's we, you know, the idiot who wrote "Feck Drink Arse Girls," you know, the people who are busy, who have lives to lead, children to bring up, all this sort of stuff, you know. But because of people like Dorian Lynskey, they just fucking don't care, you know. So the people who do care, I think, you know, we have to start putting our names to things. And I know some people get very upset when I talk about this because there's some people who simply can't. You know, I know, for instance, Tish in the comments often says, you know, she has to be very, very careful because of personal situation. I totally get that, but I think there are people who are not in those situations and who.
But wouldn't it be great if you had a sort of adjacent maybe letter just to show how many people are frightened, where somebody can say, "I'm signing this, but I'm frightened to do it as my own name." And I think it would be really, really interesting for society to see how frightened people actually are, or how many frightened people there are.
Or maybe like a letter that people can sign on iPetitions or something.
Yeah.
Because you can sign those anonymously, can't you?
Yeah.
But it's such the idea that so many people can't speak up because they're in personal situations, that's such a problem. Because, well, Rob Hoogland is a perfect example, the father who's just gone to jail. Because the second, people don't really realize what's going on until it affects them personally. And once it affects them personally, they're gagged, essentially, right? Yeah. You know, so I think it was extra, you know, I can see that there are some problems when you are speaking out publicly about your own daughter, say, but he has no other choice really but to talk about it publicly. But this is the problem, that everybody who does have a child with rapid onset gender dysphoria, they can't speak publicly or they'll lose their child, or their child will, you know, cut them out of their lives. So we need people who are not directly involved to start caring and speaking up, because they're the only ones who are going to make a difference, you know?
Yeah. Like, here's my challenge to Dorian Lynskey. If anyone, please pass this on to him, right? I would like to see him explain why he thinks it's okay for young children to have puberty blockers. I would like to see why he thinks it's okay. Maybe
Dorian Lynskey would like to come on the mess and talk to us about it. Let's offer a chat with him and see if he's willing to come on and actually talk about it.
But before that, I really would just like answers to those questions. You know, why is Dorian Lynskey okay with men in women's prisons? Why is he okay with men in women's sports? Why is he okay with the destruction of single-sex spaces? You know, tell me why all that is not something that you need to fight, and you need to fight with every fucking breath in your body. Tell me why.
We will see, won't we? Because my guess is that Dorian Lynskey wouldn't actually want to answer those questions. So let's see. Let's offer him a challenge. See if he's willing to come on and talk to us about it. Because my guess is that it's much easier to call people radicalized and bigots than it is to actually answer the questions. And it's not guess, is it? We know this. We know this. We've known this forever.
It's not what? It's not what?
It's not a guess, is it? That people are not actually willing to answer the question.
No.
I mean,
he knows
Twitter
very well.
account was based on it.
I mean, you know, and someone pointed out in a reply to him, these are people who have opinions on everything else in the world, you know, and they're sharing them 24 hours a day. But when it comes to women's rights, they shut up because they're fucking cowards. So, you know, anyway, sorry.
Anyway, well, I think that's an excellent way to end.
Yeah. Let's do it. We've got a fun new character coming up. He's the last gender unbender. He's a kind of magician who kind of breaks through the spell and tells people what's really going on. So look out for him.
Excellent.
Sounds good, isn't it? Sounds like something that won't get me in trouble. Lovely to see you guys as always. What a treat! You make me. You really cheer me up, as do the people in the comments. The people
in the comments. I want to say hello to PD Baseman there. Over Christmas, we did a song together. We recorded Baby It's Cold Outside. But by the time we finished it, it was way after Christmas. So we just have to wait until next year to actually release it.
Were you just all over Christmas? You were just persuading each other to stay in the house, and you were trying to leave. There was one other thing I was going to say. Oh yes, please like and subscribe. Press the little bell so you know when something's happening. And yeah, lovely to see you all. See you next week. Bye bye, everyone.
See you guys. Bye.